Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cleveland Sports Bros podcast. I'm Matt alongside my brother Nick. Nick, how are you doing today?
Great. Love talking Cleveland sports.
Yep, so we will definitely talk Cleveland sports. We'll also talk the unfortunate result of the Ohio State-Michigan game from this Saturday. Ohio State came in, they were favored by, I believe, 8 points against a tough, undefeated, third-ranked Michigan team. And they were up at halftime, but the second half was just a disaster. Michigan outplayed Ohio State in nearly every aspect of the game. They were hitting on big plays. Ohio State had 90 plus yards in penalties, I believe. They couldn't seem to move the ball in the second half. They couldn't stop anything that Michigan was throwing at them. And it just was a totally disappointing game. And now they're on the outside looking in as far as playoffs go. I think there's still a chance. The way I see it is they probably need USC to lose in their championship game. They play Utah. So I think there's actually a decent chance of that happening. But, aside from that, sure, LSU could beat Georgia, but I imagine the committee would probably keep Georgia in. I don't know. They still have a chance of getting in, but I don't even know if they deserve it. Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, it was certainly a tough game to watch, as you mentioned, especially in the second half. And Michigan outplayed them, offense, defense, rushing, passing. And it seemed that Ohio State was in the same coverage for most of the second half. Not only was it easy to recognize, but the broadcast was pointing that out. And a close friend of mine, agreed with me that they weren't making in-game changes, and that's not going to get it done.
Yeah, and it seemed like they were not getting any pressure at all on the quarterback. Of course, Ohio State missed Jackson Smith and Jigba. He's been out for most of the season, but I don't know. There were no excuses to kind of get beat down the way that they did, and completely outcoached. I think that was something that we hadn't seen until the last 2 years when Ryan Day has faced Harbaugh. So there's a lot of question marks, I think, in the coaching room as well. I'm wondering, I don't think they're going to go away from Ryan Day or anything anytime soon, but maybe if this happens again. But, no Big Ten championship this year after starting 11-0. It's definitely going to be a disappointing season, and it can only really be made up if they somehow make it in the playoffs and go on to win the national championship. I think a lot of diehard fans will say it doesn't matter because they lost to Michigan, even if they were to win the national title. I disagree. And look, they could even play them again if they were to make the playoffs. So that would be fascinating. But, just disappointing weekend from that standpoint. So we'll have to see what happens. And maybe the Boilermakers can go on and beat Michigan. I don't know if that would kick Michigan out of the playoffs. You can make the case it should, but I also could make the case that it's not fair for Michigan to get penalized in kind of a bonus game that Ohio State doesn't even have to play if they were to lose. But, we'll see what happens. And, again, Ohio State should have taken care of business. They were at home and they couldn't. So, we'll see what happens with these championship games.
Yeah, one final point, not to look too far ahead. You never know what both OSU and Michigan's record will be in 2023 when they meet up again. But Michigan has a chance to win 3 straight against OSU, regardless of what the records may be, and OSU has to put their foot down and not allow that.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of used to be if you lost 2 in a row, that was your job. That's changed a little bit, but we'll see. The season definitely isn't over yet, but I think they deserve to be on the outside looking in of the playoff picture. So we'll see what happens. Let's move on to, I can't believe we're saying it, positive football news. Sort of. The Cleveland Browns won against Tampa Bay in overtime. Nick, what do you have to say about that game?
Yeah, as we know, it was Jacoby Brissett's final 11 game 11 of the 11-game stretch, and he in the offense that has looked pretty strong for the majority of the games. It was all three phases, as Coach Stefanski likes to say, offense, defense, special teams, that really gelled it together, and especially in the final few possessions defensively for the Cleveland Browns, they were able to keep Brady and his receivers in check. And what a play that was! Brissett having a fourth down, game tying touchdown pass to David Njoku, who caught it left-handed, one-handed in the back of the end zone to send the game to overtime. Just unbelievable catch, and just what can you say? And then the Browns started on defense in overtime. They held the Buccaneers, and Cooper had a big reception, made up for an inexcusable drop that occurred in regulation, and Nick Chubb down at the 2-yard line punched it in after being stuffed, and the Browns got a 23-17 victory over the GOAT.
They did, yeah. It's just something not many people expected. And now Deshaun Watson is coming back. He was reinstated earlier today. Of course, we know all about the off the field issues. We're going to focus on the actual football here. And it is what it is. He's the Browns starting quarterback. So whether you like that or don't like that, we're going to talk about him in the team. So they're standing at 4-7 right now. Realistically, if they want any hope of making the playoffs, they gotta win every last one of these games and end up 10-7. I know it's possible if they were to lose a game. It would be very unlikely, but it would even be pretty unlikely if they won all those games, which you can make the case that they're going to be favored in all of them, perhaps except for, shockingly, Washington. But we'll see. They start at Houston. Houston is 1-9-1, I believe. And of course, that's Deshaun's former home. So that should be, come with a lot of drama. But like Stefanski says, got to take it 1 week at a time, take care of business. They should certainly win this game. Hopefully shake off the rust that Watson may have and move on to the next week.
And a good point was made from other reporters that facing a team with a record of 1-9-1 is, you would think is a pretty good way to try and knock off the rust. Browns fans need to keep in mind these 6 games, as much as we want to see Deshaun explode as hopefully the Browns franchise quarterback, that probably won't be the case in the final 6 games this season. I know what he's capable of: RPOs, play action, scrambling, and even making big plays with his legs. But I think the focus for Deshaun this year and the Cleveland Browns is getting him comfortable with the scheme that Stefanski runs and his new teammates. But it'll be exciting to see what the offense can offer, and the defense needs to continue to step up and do their part to help them get wins. Otherwise, you're not going to find a way to win.
Yeah, and it'll definitely be interesting to see. It was obvious to anyone who is a fan and has been watching that Jacoby Brissett was beloved in that locker room. He seemed like a tremendous leader, and he can still be a leader in that locker room, but not so much as a starter, at least not playing. So we'll we'll see how that plays out. Deshaun's gonna, I would argue, have an uphill battle in taking over that locker room and being the number one leader. So we'll see if that can actually play out well as far as the Browns are concerned.
Yeah, it'll be tough, but I heard Stefanski earlier today mention that, you know, it's not like he was invisible from the locker room. He, got to know the offense in the very beginning of the year when they, went on vacation and got that bonding, and he said that's a big help. So we'll see what happens on and off the field. But now we're gonna talk a little bit of Cavaliers. They've won 4 of their last 5 games, and last night they beat the Detroit Pistons after a tough loss to the Milwaukee Bucks when the Cavaliers had an 11-point lead at halftime against Milwaukee. They ended up losing by 15. I would blame some of that partially on just not having one of your big defenders, Jared Allen, who was also not present in the Detroit Pistons game last night. But Evan Mobley stepped up with 20 points, 13 rebound double-double, and they actually have a back-to-back game tonight as they will go to Toronto and face the Raptors, a team that beat them in the first game of the year. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Toronto beat the Cavs in the first game of the season. As we all know, Darius Garland got hurt early on in that game after getting poked in the eye. Otherwise, I think the Cavs would have won that game. But Toronto, last I checked, is favored by about 3 points, so nothing huge or anything like that. They are 10-9 versus the Cavs 13-7. So I actually like the Cavs' chances tonight. It's always tough on a back-to-back, especially as well as going on the road. Especially to Canada, you need your passport and all that. But it'd be nice. These are games that you got to win. You got to win some of these tough road game back-to-back nights, against good, solid playoff teams.
Conference.
Yep, in your conference as well. So it'd definitely be it's still early in the season, but a big, important win if they're able to pull this one out.
Definitely. I actually don't have much to say on the Cavs, unfortunately. While I have been watching them closely, I don't have a ton of stats in front of me, but I feel they've done a real nice job in the first 20-some games. I do feel that maybe rotations need to be made more often so that we have seen the Cavs blow some leads so that, you're not going to win every game, but leads that they should have hung on to. Trying to think of some games like the Warriors. I believe they were leading by 7 at one point with a couple of minutes remaining in the game. And while they do, just one example, while the Warriors do have the Splash Brothers, Curry and Clay, I think they just, there's some games they need to, keep the lead and
keep their foot on the gas. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. Toronto is a tough matchup, so it should be a fun one to watch.
Yep, for sure. And then they'll have the night off and then host the very tough 76ers on Wednesday. So looking forward to them closing out the week with that, or at least this month, I should say. They play on Friday as well, but we'll see what they can do. A couple tough opponents and real tests early on in the season. So again, missing Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, I think, is out as well. No one's going to be at full strength for every game, but got to go out and win these ones. Nick, anything else to add?
No.
All right. Well, as always, great talking sports with you, and thank you for everyone listening. This has been the Cleveland Sports Bros podcast.